By the way, my name is Fatia. I'm from Code Control. Code Control itself is a tech startup based in Berlin. We try to connect freelancer with business, so we both get benefits from it. And this is our first pilot event, which is CrypTalk, where we have a casual discussion over cryptocurrency, blockchain, and things alike. Today we will talk about Ethereum with Sebastian here. He's a developer and also a blockchain evangelist. If Sebastian can, introduce yourself, that would be really great.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. So yeah, my name is Sebastian. I'm originally French, but now I'm kind of traveling the world. I'm one of those digital nomads, as you call them. And I've been like a software engineer for probably 17 years now, and probably 4 or 5 of those years really deep into blockchain in general, Ethereum in particular. I also have a course on Udemy about blockchain Ethereum smart contract development. So yeah, and my mission sort of is to explain and raise awareness about the fact that the blockchain is not just about cryptocurrencies, that the crypto bro speculation thing is only the tip of the iceberg. There's much more to it than that. And that's why I love participating in events like that.
Great. Well, thank you for the introduction. So basically the way we do things here, we will just, we all know what Ethereum is here. And I think the main point of like talk today is their upgrade version that will hopefully come on in the summer, if not by Q3, if Vitalik is right. But he's been talking about it for the past 2 years, so we all hope that it will be true. So Sebastian, what's your main concern with Ethereum 2.0?
Well, what you just mentioned, I think, is interesting, because as a matter of fact, they've been talking about proof of stake and Ethereum 2.0 since the very release of Ethereum itself. It's always been part of the plans to make it a proof of stake blockchain. They knew back then in 2015 when they released Ethereum that the technology was kind of complicated and the algorithms were not there anymore yet. So they needed to do some more work on that, and they just didn't want to wait for that to be bulletproof before they released the network, because the main aspect that Ethereum brought to the stage was smart contracts. So, and that was already an interesting development. So yeah, and then the original plan was to release proof of stake and Ethereum 2 and what they call the Serenity upgrade back in 2017, I think. And then ever since that time, they've been pushing it back and like postponing this release. I think the real work on it, like the actual grunt of the work on it, started exactly 2 or 3 years ago, where they really made it a top priority. And now it's coming to an end, but as you said, there's nothing certain. We've been told before that it's 6 months away. So now there are some really encouraging signs. The fact that they've tested it on 2 different test nets. The first one, there were already some issues that were noted and fixed back, I think it was late last year. And then a few weeks ago, on March 15, they tested it on the Kiln testnet, which was again dedicated to that. And this one, it was a success. There was a slight issue with one of the clients, but nothing damaging for the release itself. So now normally the next step is just to release it on the main testnets, I would say, Ropsten and Gurley mostly. and see if it works there. And if it does, then there's nothing blocking a release on the mainnet. But I don't think they will risk giving an actual release date until they've tested it on Robson and Bodhi.
I mean, yeah, I totally agree. I think that's everyone's concern right now. What about anyone here want to join in, chime in with your thoughts about this development? Martin?
Yeah, I basically have a question. If we move to version 2, how does it affect the, for example, smart contract layer? Are they completely not coupled, or does that one will need changes and improvements as well? So in other words, are we going to Ether 2 and then we'll have to wait before we can do things we can do with smart contracts and Serenity, and then probably, hopefully, in a better way? Or is it just really like separate layers, so you won't notice this?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so when we said that the actual work on Ethereum 2 started 2 years ago, it's because the whole release process for Ethereum 2 has been divided into 3 steps, 3 phases, basically. And what was released in December of 2020 was phase 0. And phase 0 was the launch of what they call the Beacon chain, which is a proof of stake version of Ethereum that runs alongside the mainnet and is not connected to it. So the main point of this was to test the consensus algorithm itself in isolation almost, and also to start gathering stakes. So since December of 2020, you could already stake some Ethereum on there and prepare basically the groundwork for phase 1. Phase 1 is what is happening right now. And phase 1 will basically be merging this Beacon chain that's proof of stake with the existing chain, the mainnet, that's still proof of work. And the way that this will happen is by making basically the mainnet the first shard in a multi-sharded network. So the Beacon chain will remain the kind of the backbone of Ethereum, and then the mainnet will run connected to it, and so the whole network will become proof of stake. The impact on smart contracts at this point is null. There's none, because there's no change in the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, the engine basically that runs the smart contract. At this point, there's no change in that. There's only going to be one shard, and that's going to be the mainnet shard. Later on, they will release multi-sharded, like they will enable more shards, and those shards will each have their own smart contracts. So we'll need to start thinking about how do we make smart contracts that are running on different shards communicate with one another. That's going to be another issue, but that's going to be basically the second sub-phase of phase 1. And an even bigger change is coming with phase 2, where they're going to change the EVM itself, but that's longer term. So I think we can start to prepare smart contracts, but it's not going to have a huge impact right away.
No, but I mean, if you look at this from a proof of stake perspective, and if you also look at private blockchains, I come from a supply chain management background industry, where you typically have 8 companies who are just exchanging messages, etc., and want to record their transactions. Then a private blockchain is extremely attractive, especially if the coins are or transaction coins and eventually transactions are minted in a lightweight manner. So I can see that by moving to proof of stake, that at least we get to a situation where it becomes easier for a group of companies. And it could be, for example, banking companies. Well, with coins, that's a better example, but it could also be chemical industries, food industries, etc., where companies that are already in a circle of trust and are doing business can benefit greatly of smartly contracts, but it's only going to be viable with a coin that is light enough to generate to do so. So that's why my question. Okay, thank you very much, and please go ahead.
Well, thank you for the questions. It's a discussion, right? So we can talk about anything related to Ethereum here. And as we all know that it's we're moving to proof of stake here. There are a lot of advantage and a lot of drawbacks. And Sebastian, do you think it's worth it to move to POS instead of staying in POW, proof of work?
Definitely. There are so many. The drawbacks are actually very small in comparison to like all the advantages that it brings. There've been a lot of concerns, I think, mostly raised by historic blockchains like Bitcoin and everything, because of the risk that it implies that we are moving to a new consensus algorithm that's not been battle tested to that scale, at least. Mm-hmm. There are already running blockchains that use proof of stake as a consensus algorithm, but they're all anecdotal in comparison to the scale that Ethereum has. One of them that I like really a lot is Tezos, for example. They've been working with proof of stake for a couple of years now, and it works really great.
Which one?
Tezos.
Tezos. Okay.
Yeah. They're just only proof of stake, and it works really well, but at a scale that has nothing to do. Like, just if you look at the valuation, I had the numbers here. I think Tezos it's like $3.5 billion valuation, and the valuation of Ethereum is $412 billion. So in terms of just volume at stake, there's no comparison here. So it's going to be very interesting in that regard. And there are some risks, and the risks are the main reason that it took so long for people to come around and figure out why, how it could actually work. There are some risks that are also inherent to the fact that we are not starting a new blockchain from scratch. We have to migrate an existing network with a lot of smart contracts running on them, with a lot of people involved, and we have to move all that huge ecosystem to a completely new infrastructure engine, basically. So yeah, that in and of itself also is a risk. But again, it's always been in the culture of Ethereum from day one that yes, security is important, but not more important than innovation. And in the grand scheme of things, I would even argue, and I know it's kind of far-fetched for some people, but even if it fails, it's going to be such an important and an interesting lesson for the ecosystem at large, because despite all the smart people that worked on it, despite all the energy that was spent on it, despite all the money that was invested in it, if we can't make proof of stake work at scale, it's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
And for me, I compare that to what happened with the dot-com bubble. Yeah, sure. A lot of people lost a shit ton of money in dot-com startups in the early 2000s. but that money just didn't disappear. It didn't vanish in thin air. It funded PHP, it funded Apache, it funded MySQL, it funded all the infrastructure basis for all the internet companies that popped up afterwards. And I think we gotta try it. There's no way around it. Proof of work is very safe, but it has a lot of issues. And I'm not just talking about the environmental friendliness kind of thing, because for me, that argument is dubious at best, but still, I'm talking about scalability mostly. If we want blockchains to be used widely and to solve real problems, they need to be more scalable. And for that, the answer on Ethereum, sorry, Martin, I just finished this. But the answer for that on Ethereum is going to be sharding and all of that. And sharding pretty much requires proof of stake. So yeah, we need to go that way. I don't see a way around it. Martin, you were saying?
So, yeah, and this is exactly, I mean, one of the outcomes could also be it's not just success or fail, but what you could also have is a certain set of scenarios where proof of stake is good enough and maybe can even grow a lot. I mentioned the private blockchains, say between 6 participants that trust each other. Then you can more easily imagine. So you can also learn the boundaries for, okay, in what scenario is the proof, maybe it's in all scenarios, but if not, you can learn in what scenarios proof of work is an easier going way to go, especially for private blockchains. I think I can see clearly that this is not going to become, at worst, it's going to be a lesson learned, but I can see it's more of a gray area. It's either all to the white, or it might be that, well, it's usable, but up to this point, and so you can fit your scenario on that, much as with other larger initiatives.
Yeah, I think we all have to agree that to a certain point, this is the cost of development and innovation that we all have to bear one way or another. And actually 5 people think that the Ethereum 2.0 will be successful. Anyone want to chime in on that? Elaborate more on their opinion?
I can just briefly state mine. I think it will be successful because it can be successful not for the whole Ethereum network, but for private chains or smaller areas up to a point. It can be just, I mean, the way that you mint a new coin can have different ways of implementing. We have talked about proof of stake, proof of work. You can think of other ones. And I see that as a scenario-based approach. And I think proof of stake is one that we are testing right now. What are the limits of that one? So that's why I'm positive.
And I think what's interesting as well in terms of benefits, and again, in the grand scheme of things, if we just take a step back from just Ethereum itself, it's the first time that we're going to use proof of stake of a network of that scale, of that level. If it works out, can you imagine like how it will open the floodgates to so many projects who, well, first of all, will have a demonstration that it works. It's just the same thing as when Bitcoin came out. Bitcoin opened the Pandora's box that was impossible to close again. And if proof of stake works on Ethereum, it's going to be the same kind of effect. So a lot of blockchains or just like nascent projects who wanted to get into that space but were kind of hesitant, will have a demonstration that at least it's possible. And if it's possible, then we can either do the same thing or do something even better. And also it will put a lot of pressure on other blockchains to kind of follow suit, because on the one hand, you will have this blockchain that's super like performant, efficient, and has smart contracts. On the longer term with sharding and a better EVM, will have like a lot of like solid arguments for massive use. It, of course, it will put a lot of pressure on the whole ecosystem to innovate in that direction. Whereas for now, we've kind of been, I feel like we've been kind of been slowed down by a lot of conservatism, may I say maximalism, from people who were kind of reluctant to innovate in any way because, well, we have something that works, let's not touch anything anymore. That's kind of the dangerous. Yeah.
I totally agree with you there. And like I said, it's interesting to see how far this can be taken, and if it can be taken to basically infinity or the max or whatever you would call it. That would be great, because it would allow, especially in combination with smart contracts, a lot of new ways. Just for the information, I'm a platform architect at the European Medical Agency. So we have contact with, big pharma, but also what we call national competent agencies. So your national health councils, etc. And then a blockchain, a private blockchain between people or organizations that trust each other is extremely interesting compared to what you now have, which is a classical database. So that's why I'm first. I was happy to be invited for the seminar, and then I thought I really need to be there, because that. I mean, this could solve problems both from commercial to the public Ethereum network, but also to the non-profit sector, and that's a big thing. That's really a big thing.
Yeah, glad that you bring us a new perspective, because I think most of us here, they're like developer on different field too. Sebastian,
it's a big thing, especially in terms of public perception. I think so far there's been a lot of narrative pushed by, I would say, legacy actors who have said, yeah, sure, it's interesting, it's an interesting new technology, it's decentralized and everything, but it's not efficient, it's very slow, it's very expensive. The decentralization comes at a price that's way too high. So those arguments have slowed down the evolution, and the even, I'm not just talking about technical evolution, I'm talking about decentralization as a philosophy and as a concept. There's a lot of applications that have been blocked or at least slowed down by this kind of public narrative. And now you were talking about like asking the question, like, is it worth it? Just to give a few numbers, we're talking about going from, well, basically reducing the energy consumption of the entire Ethereum network by 99.95%. We're dividing it by 2,000.
So it's climate neutral as well.
I wouldn't say it's climate neutral. Nothing is climate neutral, and
no, but it's always getting closer.
It's getting closer, and again, it's always about comparing how much you spend versus how much you get. It's a ratio. It's not out in thin air, and so far there hasn't been any like real comparison. Again, this argument of energy consumption is dubious at best, because you need to compare it to what makes sense. And one number I found, for example, is that the new Ethereum network with proof of stake will basically represent 0.4% of the energy consumption of the Visa network, which is a very frequent point of comparison that we use. Now, of course, people will always make the mistake of dividing the total energy consumption of the network by the number of transactions they can process, which is a mistake because it assumes that those two numbers are proportional to each other, which they are not, especially not in a decentralized context. But now, even on that front, Ethereum, again, when phase one is complete, meaning once we have sharding in place and those 64 shards and everything, we're talking about a TPS rate, so the number of transactions per second, in the realm of 10,000 to 100,000 transactions per second, which is exactly comparable to both Visa, MasterCard, and most transactional systems that are centralized. So we have something that's more efficient, that will be faster. Yeah, we're starting to compare here, and will still be decentralized. So all of the same things, the same features, and the same kind of characteristics that we can already see with centralized systems, but in a decentralized fashion, which opens, again, a whole slew of new applications, not just in financial terms, but in terms of democracy, in terms of governance, in terms of, health, exactly, in terms of insurance, in terms of real estate. There are so many different applications that would benefit from this decentralization that is just too, it's just too big to pass on that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think what happened with
no, I want the other ones to give an answer to the questions as well. But I have one quick question to you, and that is: this meeting is recorded. Do we get a link to the recording afterwards?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
I will send you the link to the recording. Don't worry.
That's it. And I'll shut up.
All right, thank you. Wahab, maybe?
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Wahab. I'm CTO in a fintech company, and we are definitely interested in having, for now, a private blockchain, even though being fully decentralized would be, of course, the ultimate goal. One quick thing regarding health, Martin, it's very interesting that you mentioned this, because so I'm French, as you can hear from the accent, and in France we just had a change in how we will access, and by we I mean the people and the medical professionals will access all the documentation and information and history and medical history through a portal that is really shitty, because there are no control over like anything. And this is typically where having a decentralized trustless blockchain would definitely help a lot, because you can either a medical professional who already has an access, or yourself can allow a medical professional to access your file and personal information, which is something we don't have today. So that's a very real example of where, first of all, decentralization and smart contract would be extremely useful. Now I wonder about one thing regarding more the let's say the financial world, and of course Visa, MasterCard, for example, and all these kinds of let's say way of moving money and value around. I think Sebastian, I join you on this idea that the narrative is skewed in the wrong way from a very long time, and one of the reasons is we still have money still needs, unfortunately today in the public mind, still needs to be tied to a government and banks and so on. So is there an avenue for Ethereum 2.0, let's say, to be a platform to handle those transactions, even though you still have real money behind? So in a way, not to end up like XRP, we all remember what happened there, but in a way to be the basis to actually start real decentralization of money. And could it be also a way of exchanging information and value between financial institutions, even though at the end of the day, we still end up in a big database or a private blockchain?
You're so muted.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. To be completely transparent with you, even though I can see the business case and the interest, and I can understand why companies and the corporate world right now is interested in private permissioned blockchains, I personally hate them. with all my heart and all my soul. Because for me, they're the equivalent of the intranets of the late 90s. They're an attempt at the old world to make a square peg fit in a round hole. And for me, the most interesting aspect of blockchains is not the blockchain itself, it's the decentralization. It is the primary thing. And I understand that for some companies, they're having a really hard time figuring out how those two can fit. But in my mind, there's a fundamental impedance mismatch between decentralization on one hand and cooperation and governments and the institutions that govern us today. It's by design. It was built that way. Let's not forget in what context Bitcoin was born. It was born as a direct opposition to what was happening with the subprime crisis, with investment bankers and all of that. So for me, the real potential, again, it might be long-term, it might be utopic, it might be far-fetched right now, but the real potential is global governance, is a system in which we are able to make decisions on global matters at a global level. And that will involve also global movement of value, like you said. But I'm not even considering governments and traditional corporations as a part of the equation. They're an unnecessary artifact of the old world for me. And what we need to build upon is more decentralization on every stage. And that's why DAOs are so important. That's why UBI, as it exists as an experiment already on the Ethereum blockchain, is so important. That's why those initiatives really do matter. And that's why we also need a better infrastructure to really free our minds from those old institutions of the past that are not required anymore. And again, I can understand why, in a very pragmatic, short-term way, companies are kind of experimenting with that idea, but I don't think that it's necessary nor something that's desirable that we pursue that way for too long, because we're wasting sort of a lot of energy and a lot of money in what for me again is a dead end. And yeah, we will need to get rid of them at some point, because everything points already today. Just look at what happened again outside of this world of blockchains. Just look at how incompetent and incapable all our governments and institutions were with dealing with this global pandemic. No collaboration, no cooperation whatsoever. Just look at what's happening with climate change. We've tried all the summits, we've tried all the protocols, the Kyoto protocols, we've tried all the COPs possible, and it always fails when every single government comes back home and says, yeah, but I have to do what my people elected me for. All of those things are demonstrations of the ineptitude of nation states and of the necessity of global decentralized governance at scale. And this is what a big change like proof of stake on Ethereum promises. I'm not saying it's the end all be all. There might be other steps necessary to get there, but I'm pretty convinced, like, again, it's my personal feeling that private or permission blockchains are sort of an image and analogy that I use in a lot of my presentations is you take a plane, and the plane is amazing because it moves so fast and it goes in a straight line from point A to point B. But on the other hand, we invested in all those roads. So let's try and cut the wings of the plane and drive with that wingless plane on the highway. Yeah, that's going to work. No, it's nonsense.
I think Manuel also want to say something earlier. Sorry to cut you, Wahab. Or maybe not. Well, then in that case, I just want to facilitate.
I have a small reaction on this. So first of all, I think that one of the ways you could look at now I've learned, much despite private blockchains, is for smaller groups to set up a private blockchain and trade with each other, and at fixed points in time they look at what they have spent and owe to, for example, the same partner. Then they have what they need to settle, and that's what they do on the public blockchain. So I think it doesn't have to be an evil thing. It might be an enabler, if you wish, for participating organizations to settle things between themselves, and then they make the real transactions to do the settlements on the public blockchain. So if I frame it like that, how can you still counter me?
What is the benefit of such an approach in a closed group of companies in a private blockchain? So that's a trustful environment. The reason why we've been banging our heads against the wall with proof of stake and proof of work and all of that for years is to solve that triangular equation of decentralization, security, performance. What if you don't need decentralization, why do you need a blockchain? How is it more efficient? What does it bring as a benefit compared to using a good old network of APIs with traditional databases behind it? The very reason for the existence of a consensus algorithm is decentralization itself. If you don't need decentralization,
okay. Yeah.
do you need a blockchain at all?
That's a very good answer. That's basically only if your technicians want to play with a blockchain instead of a database.
And in that sense, it's a solution looking for a problem. So it's the real reasons that lose relevance.
Yeah.
So
okay,
if I may.
This is a really interesting discussion right here. Wahab, you can go.
No, go on, Martin. I think you are not done.
No, I'm done. I was just really wondering.
So actually, I mean, coming from, I've been working for banks for 12 years. I don't like them much. But the thing is that's a prime example where the blockchain is definitely interesting. First of all, because the proof of stake, like the concept of a blockchain is something that would be very, very useful in the financial world. And on the other hand, because today we have very, very old standards everywhere in the financial business. SWIFT, even SEPA in EU is a mess, and the central bank, and then it goes back, and this and that. So having a solution where we take control away a little bit from a centralized central bank of I don't know, in France, and the central bank of EU, and the bank in the US, and whatever, where you still have the private blockchain, because in the mind of, unfortunately, those who still control most of the money and the value, in terms of value in this case, let them keep a bit of power in the sense of private blockchain, in the sense of within either the financial world or at least even their own institution, bank, public or private, whatever, but exchanging the message. I agree that the ultimate goal of blockchain is to have a fully decentralized society, not only in terms of finance but also in terms of government and so on. But in the meantime, we still have to apply the technology to real world problems. And one of them where, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, because you said the real goal is for it now to be fully distributed worldwide, but even that may be multiple blockchains aligned along verticals. like, so you have a vertical blockchain for health, you have a vertical blockchain for banking, you have a vertical blockchain for, and so on and so on. And I think that would be the ultimate end goal if we get there. But we're talking at least a decade from now, I think. Also because society needs to adapt. I mean, people need to learn how this stuff. I actually was a fun story. I was amazed that I was talking to my new girlfriend, and she's an HR consultant coach, but on a high level, so for on an executive level. And she started asking me about this particular subject because it turned out that she had coins in different spaces and was looking up. She didn't make it to the goal, but anyway. So, and she's a very smart woman. So before we get, Joe Average to the point where they'll use the blockchain with trust, that will be a long way. I don't know how this is in your country, but when we got introduced to NFC, basically contactless payments, there was a huge pushback. And then Corona came, and the amount you could do and the number of times you could do it before you had to actually shove it into the ATM was doubled or tripled. And I thought, gee, what if we didn't have the technology in place already? So sometimes you might need this technology and then maybe a mild disaster or a societal change to get it accepted faster. But otherwise, you might be going for 10 years easily.
Well, we always have some pushback when it comes to innovation, right? It's about how to integrate it to society and how urgent it is. For example, like you said, the pandemic pushed the contactless agenda really easier. But yeah, here let's go back to the Ethereum topic because we only have 10 more minutes left. Here Joe has two interesting questions. Maybe Joe, you want to talk more about your questions?
Sure. Thanks, Sebastian, so far for the discussion. Really interesting. First thing I was just wanting to hear your comment on, I know like Ethereum is in a unique position as a future proof of staking chain that they started in proof of work. I don't think there's really any other examples of this. And people have commented how this is super valuable to the decentralization of it. So first, maybe if you have any comments on that. And then secondly, it seems that a lot of the risk associated to ETH2's development, I've heard, is really more around the sharding aspect. I'm just curious what your comments are on that. Do you think that will prevail? Are there any tests being done that proves that it works? And things like this.
I think it's going to be a staged process, and all of those innovations taken individually are incredibly complex. I don't know if you've ever attended a talk from Vlad Zamfir, who's one of the main guys working on sharding and who worked before a lot of on the ghost, the friendly ghost thing part of proof of stake. I mean, the complexity of the math involved in all of this is like mind-blowing, really. It's above my pay grade, honestly. I'm not a mathematician at all, and it's incredibly complex. So I think we got to be patient as well and realize that, again, Ethereum it was launched in 2015, so just a mere 7 years ago, and look at the kind of change and the kind of disruption that's already caused with, let's face it, a not very performant, not very efficient network at that. So it's going to be hard to predict what proof of stake will enable and open in terms of opportunities in terms of funding as well. Sharding is definitely going to be very complicated, especially when you consider the impact it's going to have on smart contract models themselves and how smart contracts can communicate with one another and all of that. I'm not aware of any other projects that have had this kind of transition from proof of work to proof of stake, let alone at that stake. And I'm not even mentioning sharding because I don't think any other blockchain really needs sharding. And sharding kind of pretty much, I mean, it's not absolute, but proof of stake is a prerequisite for sharding. So unless we have proof of stake first and we have proof of stake working, we won't have sharding in any capacity. So yeah, one step at a time. The first step is definitely for phase one to get proof of stake working and make sure that that it works with just one shard. Once we have that, I think hopefully somewhere in 2023, we can start experimenting with more shards. We can already kind of cope with the scalability issues with a lot of the L2 solutions that are already out there. Like whether they are, again, state channels, rollups, all of that are very promising and can already be used on the network as it is, and will already be usable, even more powerful with a proof of stake mainnet. So it's not like we're left hanging. We have an alternative solution in the meantime. But yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see this phase one roll out progressively. It's going to take, again, a few years, but we're talking about a paradigm shift here. So I'd rather them take the necessary time and do the necessary work in terms of research and math and everything. The least we can say is that they're not careless. They are really trying to like cross all their T's and dot all their I's, and that's a good thing. And it shouldn't block innovation, and we'll just see how it works. But I'm really curious to see the impact. And again, we've talked here about proof of stake and sharding, which are part of phase one. But then phase two involves EWASM, which is a completely new virtual machine with new paradigms as well, with a new way of programming smart contracts, with way more efficient smart contracts that require less computing power on all the nodes in the network. And by then there will be a lot of them. So yeah, there's a lot of changes on the horizon. It's very exciting. There's still a lot of groundwork to be done, and a lot of patience involved also for I would say application developers, which I'm more on the side of, because yeah, all this infrastructure still has a lot of evolution to go through.
Amazing answer and great question, Joe. Thank you so much. I think we only have time to accommodate one more question, and Sunil is ready for one more question, if you want.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Martin.
I have a very short one.
Yeah, but let's accommodate your question first. After Sunil, if we have time. Thank you.
Yeah, Sebastian, I want to ask this. I mean, if the Ethereum 2.0 changes to proof of stake, how it affects the other networks built based on it, like a Polygon? So how it affects?
If I remember correctly, I'm not super familiar with Polygon, honestly. It is an L2 network as well, right?
Yeah, it is on L2.
So L2s will continue to be able to connect with the beacon chain, with the mainnet once it's proof of stake, in the same way as it is today. The sharding will probably impact them a little more, I think, but at least in the first phase with just one shard, which is just the mainnet being proof of stake, it won't have a huge impact. The biggest impact is actually non-technical, it's more financial. Because again, I think proof of stake, because it will basically kill the argument of environmental unfriendliness will attract so much money and funding and investment in all of those protocols and all of those research projects, including Polygon, including Cosmos, including ZK Rollups, including like all of those L2 techs, that yeah, we're going to see a lot of progress on that front. But technically speaking, I don't think it, at least proof of stake itself, like what's coming on the immediate horizon, is going to have a huge impact. I don't think so.
Sebastian.
All right, great. Then one last question for Martin. Let's keep it short and concise.
Yeah, very concise. Sebastian, I'm into into IT for 6 months. I was 1.5 years out of it because I tore both of my knee ligaments, so it took some time, which means I have a bit of a knowledge gap, and that reminded me. Do you have some sort of recommended reading, viewing list available for us? And if so, can you hand it to Fatia, and she can include it in her mail? So basically, assuming that you, well, we don't know nothing, but next to nothing, all the way to Ethereum 2 and smart contracts. Whatever you can give us. I mean, you probably have a lot of material that you've gone through yourself to get to this point, and anything that you feel that is worth sharing. And there might also be things that are not worth sharing yet, or are double, etc. But you know, if you can give us a concise list, I think that would triple the value of this tremendous conference call.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for your good answers and your kind response.
You're welcome. So I sent some links to Fatia. So Fatia, if you want to share those the good sources links that I shared. To be completely honest, I follow obviously the Ethereum ecosystem and evolution quite closely, but there are some things that I needed to research to make sure that my answers and my intervention was as accurate as possible. So there's a bunch of links that I used for that. And of course, Fatia will share them, I think, afterwards. And you can go into way more details about that because it's a very vast topic. And there are layers of that topic that I can't even cover because, again, they're above my pay grade. But there's a lot of material there to go through and dig deeper.
Yeah, but should you have another few links that are more introductory than the bit deeper links that you share?
They're part of that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So
thank you very much.
After this discussion, I will send you the link to the recording for this event and also all the links, the resources that Sebastian already gave me. And yeah, I think we are on time, 1 minute before the end of 2 p.m. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you. Big thanks to Sebastian for the resources, for all these insights, and everyone who participated in the discussion. We will probably definitely have more of this. So keep an eye into our LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com on Code Control. But if you've already have me on LinkedIn, you will probably see this too. I guess I'll see you until next time. Thank you.
Yes, and I would like to thank you for providing this, and hosting this for free for us few guys. And let's grow a community slowly around this. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you.
I have to jump into another meeting, so.
All right. Have a good day. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.